The morning sun was painting the downtown streets with golden light as people started their weekend routines. Coffee shops were filling up with their usual crowd, and the smell of fresh pastries drifted through the air. It was one of those perfect Saturday mornings that promised a peaceful day ahead. Among the early visitors was a young woman named Lisa, a 22-year-old college student who had made this part of town her second home. Every weekend, she would wheel her bright purple wheelchair down the familiar sidewalk, heading to her favorite spot at Corner Cafe. The staff there knew her well, and she knew them. It was the kind of place where everyone felt welcome. Or at least that's how it used to be. Lisa wasn't just any regular customer. She was studying graphic design at the local college and had big dreams of starting her own business someday. Her wheelchair didn't slow her down one bit. In fact, she had customized it with stickers from her favorite bands and art supplies, making it uniquely hers. Her laptop bag was always packed with projects, and her smile could light up any room she entered. As she approached her usual table on the outdoor patio, Lisa noticed the weekend was bringing out all kinds of people. Families were strolling by with their children, couples were enjoying leisurely walks, and the usual group of motorcycle riders was gathering across the street. The bikers had been meeting there for months, and most of them were friendly folks who would wave and nod to the regular cafe customers. Lisa settled into her spot, the same corner table she'd claimed as her own over the past 6 months. The table was perfectly positioned where she could watch the world go by while working on her design projects. She had become a familiar face to everyone in the area, from the shop owners to the regular customers who frequented the district. The cafe owner, Mrs. Rodriguez, came out with Lisa's usual order before she even had to ask. An iced vanilla coffee and a blueberry muffin had become her weekend tradition. Mrs. Rodriguez always took a moment to chat about Lisa's latest projects, genuinely interested in her work and progress in school. Today, Lisa was working on something special. A local nonprofit had hired her to design their new logo, and she was excited about the project. It was her first paid freelance job, and she felt proud that someone trusted her skills enough to hire her. As she opened her laptop and spread her sketching materials on the table, she felt that familiar surge of creativity that always came when she was about to dive into a new project. The morning was peaceful, with the gentle hum of conversation from other tables mixing with the distant sound of motorcycle engines warming up across the street. Lisa had grown comfortable with these sounds over the months. They were part of the neighborhood's weekend rhythm, as familiar as the church bells that rang every hour from the old cathedral down the block. But today, something felt different. As she glanced up from her laptop screen, she noticed a new face among the regular group of bikers. A tall man with visible tattoos covering his arms was standing with the group, but he wasn't joining in their friendly banter. Instead, he seemed to be looking around with a critical eye, as if he was judging everything and everyone he saw. The man's name was Tommy, and he had recently moved to town after losing his job at a factory in another state. He was bitter about his circumstances and looking for someone to blame for his problems. He had joined the motorcycle group, hoping to find people who shared his angry outlook on life, but most of the regular members were nothing like what he expected. They were working people, family men and women who rode motorcycles as a hobby, not as a statement of rebellion. Meanwhile, on his regular patrol through the downtown area, Officer Johnson was making his usual rounds. He had been walking this beat for over 15 years and knew almost everyone in the district by name. Officer Johnson wasn't just a police officer, he was a pillar of the community. He volunteered at local schools, helped organize neighborhood watch programs, and always had time to listen when someone needed help. The officer had noticed Lisa when she first started coming to the cafe months ago. He admired her determination and positive attitude. He had seen how she never let her wheelchair limit her dreams or her daily activities. Over time, he had learned about her studies, her artwork, and her plans for the future. To him, she represented everything good about the younger generation, someone who worked hard and contributed positively to the community. As Officer Johnson walked past the cafe that morning, he waved to Lisa, who looked up from her laptop and smiled back. It was a simple exchange, but it represented the kind of community connection that made the neighborhood special. Everyone looked out for each other, and everyone belonged. The morning continued peacefully as Lisa worked on her design project. She was in her creative zone, completely absorbed in her work. The logo was starting to take shape on her screen, and she felt satisfied with the progress she was making. Around her, life went on at its usual weekend pace. Families with children walked by, some stopping to admire the artwork she had displayed on her table. A young boy, probably around 8 years old, broke away from his parents and approached Lisa's table with curiosity. His eyes were wide as he looked at her colorful drawings and the design on her laptop screen. "Are you an artist?" the boy asked with the innocent directness that only children possess. Lisa smiled warmly. "I'm learning to be one. I'm still in school, but I love creating things that make people happy." The boy's mother approached, looking slightly embarrassed. "I'm sorry if he's bothering you. He loves art class at school." "He's not bothering me at all," Lisa replied. "Would you like to see what I'm working on?" She turned her laptop screen toward the boy, showing him the colorful logo design in progress. The boy's face lit up with excitement. "Wow, that's so cool. Can you teach me how to do that?" Lisa spent a few minutes explaining her work in simple terms that the child could understand. His genuine enthusiasm reminded her why she loved what she did. Art wasn't just about creating something beautiful. It was about connecting with people and bringing joy to their lives. After the family moved on, Lisa felt energized and returned to her work with renewed focus. She was making good progress on the logo when she became aware of a conversation happening nearby. At first, she didn't pay much attention, but the voices were getting louder and more aggressive. Looking up from her laptop, she saw that the new biker, Tommy, had separated from his group and was walking in her direction. There was something about his body language that made her feel uncomfortable. His shoulders were tense, his hands were clenched, and his face wore an expression that seemed hostile and confrontational. Lisa tried to focus on her work, hoping that whatever was bothering the man had nothing to do with her. She had learned over the years that sometimes it was best to avoid eye contact with people who seemed upset or angry. But as Tommy got closer to her table, she realized that she might be the target of his attention. The other cafe customers were starting to notice the situation too. Conversations at nearby tables grew quieter as people sensed that something was about to happen. Mrs. Rodriguez, who was serving coffee to customers on the patio, glanced over with concern as she noticed Tommy approaching Lisa's table. Lisa's heart started to beat faster as she realized that the peaceful morning she had been enjoying was about to be interrupted. She had faced challenges before because of her disability, but usually they came in the form of buildings without proper access or people who stared without understanding. She had never encountered someone who seemed actively hostile toward her presence. Tommy stopped a few feet from her table, close enough that his shadow fell across her laptop screen. Lisa looked up, trying to maintain her composure, and hoping that maybe he just wanted to ask her a question or needed directions. But the look in his eyes told her that this wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. The weekend morning that had started so peacefully was about to take a turn that none of the regular cafe customers could have predicted. Lisa gripped her laptop a little tighter and took a deep breath, preparing herself for whatever was about to happen. She had no way of knowing that this moment would become a turning point, not just for her, but for the entire community that had welcomed her as one of their own. Across the street, Officer Johnson was finishing his conversation with the shop owner when he noticed the change in atmosphere at the cafe. His years of experience had taught him to recognize when a situation was developing, and something about the scene at Lisa's table caught his attention. Without rushing, but with purpose, he began walking toward the cafe, ready to help if his assistance was needed. Tommy stood near Lisa's table, his shadow blocking the sunlight from her laptop screen. The peaceful morning atmosphere had shifted, and other customers were starting to notice that something was happening. Lisa looked up from her work, trying to keep her voice steady and polite. "Good morning," she said, hoping that maybe he just needed directions or had a simple question. "Is there something I can help you with?" Tommy's response wasn't what she expected. His voice was loud enough that people at nearby tables could hear every word. "Yeah, there's something you can help me with. You can help me understand why you Think you deserve to take up the best spot out here? Lisa felt confused by his comment. She had been coming to this same table for months, and no one had ever complained before. I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean. This is just where I usually sit to work on my projects. That's exactly the problem, Tommy said, his voice getting louder. People like you always think you deserve special treatment. You roll up here taking the prime real estate, expecting everyone else to work around you. The words hit Lisa like a cold splash of water. She realized that this wasn't about the table at all. This was about her wheelchair, about who she was as a person. Her hand started to shake slightly, but she tried to keep her composure. I'm just a customer here, same as everyone else, Lisa replied, her voice quieter now, but still firm. I order my coffee. I sit at my table and I work on my computer. I'm not asking for any special treatment. Other customers were definitely paying attention now. An elderly couple at a nearby table had stopped eating their breakfast and were watching. With concern, a young mother with her baby had paused her conversation with a friend, clearly uncomfortable with what she was witnessing. Tommy wasn't satisfied with Lisa's calm response. If anything, it seemed to make him more angry. Don't give me that innocent act. You know exactly what you're doing. You put yourself right here where everyone has to see you and feel sorry for you. It's like you're asking for pity. Lisa felt her face getting hot with embarrassment and anger. She had worked so hard to live independently, to be seen as capable and strong. Hearing someone reduce her entire existence to seeking pity was painful, in a way that cut deeper than she expected. I'm not asking anyone to feel sorry for me, she said, her voice starting to crack with emotion. I'm a college student. I work hard. I have dreams and goals just like everyone else. I come here because I like this place, not because I want attention. Mrs. Rodriguez, the cafe owner, had been watching from inside through the large windows. She could see that the situation was getting more serious and she didn't like what she was witnessing. She started walking toward the door, unsure of exactly what she should do, but knowing she couldn't just stand by and watch one of her favorite customers being treated badly. Tommy took a step closer to Lisa's table, and his voice got even louder. Dreams and goals, that's a good one. What kind of dreams can someone like you really have? You're just taking up space that could be used by people who can actually contribute something to society. The cruelty of his words made several customers gasp audibly. The young mother gathered her baby closer to her chest and looked around, hoping someone would step in to help. The elderly man at the nearby table started to stand up, but his wife gently pulled him back down, worried that getting involved might make things worse. Lisa felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she was determined not to let this man see her cry. She had faced ignorance before, but never such open hostility from a complete stranger. Her voice was shaking now, but she still tried to respond with dignity. I pay for my coffee just like everyone else. I tip the staff. I'm polite to other customers. I don't understand why you think I don't belong here. Because you don't, Tommy shot back immediately. You belong at home or in some special place designed for people with your problems. Normal people shouldn't have to deal with looking at this. He gestured toward her wheelchair with obvious disgust. The words felt like physical blows to Lisa. Every insecurity she had ever felt about her disability came rushing back at once. All the times she had wondered if people were staring. All the moments she had questioned whether she was making others uncomfortable. All the self-doubt she had worked so hard to overcome. Mrs. Rodriguez finally reached the patio area. Her face was flushed with anger, and her hands were on her hips. Excuse me, sir, but I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice and stop bothering my customer. Tommy turned his attention to Mrs. Rodriguez, clearly annoyed by the interruption. Your customer? Lady, you're running a business here. Don't. You think it would be better for business if you didn't have to deal with situations like this? The only situation I see here is someone being rude to a young woman who has never caused any problems. Mrs. Rodriguez replied firmly. Lisa is one of my best customers. She's polite, she pays her bill, and she brightens up everyone's day with her smile. You, on the other hand, are making everyone uncomfortable. Tommy's face was getting red with anger. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by women. This isn't about being polite. This is about what's right for the community. People like her make everyone else uncomfortable. They just don't want to say it. Lisa was fighting back tears as she listened to two people argue about her as if she wasn't even there. Part of her wanted to just pack up her things and leave to avoid causing any more trouble. But another part of her was angry that she should have to give up her favorite place just because one person couldn't accept her presence. "I make people uncomfortable?" Lisa finally spoke up, her voice stronger than it had been all morning. "I've been coming here for 6 months. I've talked to dozens of people. Children ask me about my artwork. Parents thank me for being kind to their kids. The staff here treats me like family. You're the first person who has ever had a problem with me being here." The other customers were listening to every word now. Some were nodding in agreement with Lisa, remembering the friendly interactions they had witnessed over the months. The young mother spoke up from her table, her voice carrying across the patio. "She's right. I've seen her here before. My daughter loves talking to her about art. She's always been nothing but nice to everyone." The elderly gentleman who had started to stand up earlier couldn't stay quiet any longer. "Young man, I've been coming to this cafe for 10 years and I've never seen anyone treat another customer the way you're treating this young lady. It's disgraceful." Tommy was getting frustrated that people weren't agreeing with him. In his mind, he was saying what everyone was thinking but was too polite to say out loud. The fact that they were defending Lisa made him even more angry. "Oh, great. Now everyone's going to pretend to be heroes," he said sarcastically. "You all feel good about yourselves defending the disabled girl. But I bet when you get home you tell your families about how uncomfortable it made you feel." "That's enough," Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. "Sir, I'm asking you to leave my property right now. You're disturbing my customers and creating a hostile environment." Tommy looked around at all the faces staring at him. Instead of backing down, he seemed to get more determined to make his point. "I'm not going anywhere until she does. This is supposed to be a public space, and I have just as much right to be here as anyone else." Lisa's laptop was still open in front of her, her artwork displayed on the screen. The logo she had been working on seemed so unimportant now compared to what was happening. She looked at the design she had been so proud of just minutes earlier, and it felt like it belonged to a different person living in a different world. "Please," Lisa said quietly, her voice barely audible above the tension in the air. "I don't want any trouble. Maybe I should just go." "No," Mrs. Rodriguez said immediately. "You are not going anywhere. This is your place too, and no one has the right to make you feel like you don't belong here." But Tommy wasn't finished. He took another step closer to Lisa's table, close enough now that she could smell his cologne mixed with the scent of cigarettes. His voice dropped to a more menacing tone, which somehow felt more threatening than when he had been shouting. "You know what? I'm tired of talking about this. Maybe it's time to solve this problem in a more direct way." Lisa's heart started pounding as she realized that the situation was escalating beyond just harsh words. She looked around desperately, hoping to see someone who might be able to help. The other customers looked concerned but seemed unsure of what to do. Mrs. Rodriguez was brave, but she was a small woman facing a much larger, increasingly aggressive man. That's when Lisa noticed Officer Johnson walking across the street, his attention clearly focused on what was happening at the cafe. She had never been so relieved to see anyone in her entire life. Tommy looked around at the faces of the other customers, all of whom were clearly on Lisa's side. Even some of his fellow bikers from across the street had walked over to see what was happening, and they looked embarrassed by his behavior. One of the other bikers, a middle-aged man named Dave, stepped forward. "Tommy, man, this isn't what our group is about. We don't harass people, especially not people who are just trying to enjoy their day." Tommy felt increasingly isolated as he realized that even his new motorcycle group wasn't supporting his actions. "Fine, whatever. I guess I'm the only one who's willing to say what everyone else is thinking." "No, sir," Officer Johnson said firmly. "You're the only one here who's thinking what you're thinking. Everyone else sees a young woman working on her computer and living her life. You're the one who has a problem with that, and that problem is yours to deal with." The officer's words were measured and professional, but they carried the weight of absolute moral authority. He continued, "I'm going to need you to leave this establishment now and allow these people to enjoy their morning in peace." Tommy looked around one more time, hoping to find some support, but he saw only disapproving faces. Even the cafe staff had gathered near the windows, watching the situation unfold and clearly supporting Lisa. "This is ridiculous," Tommy muttered, but his voice lacked the confidence it had earlier. "I have rights too, you know." "You absolutely do have rights," Officer Johnson agreed. "But those rights don't include the right to harass other people or make them feel unwelcome in public spaces. Your rights end where other people's rights begin." Lisa finally spoke up, her voice stronger now that she felt protected and supported. "I never wanted any trouble. I just want to be able to come here and work on my projects like everyone else." "Officer," Johnson turned to her with a kind expression. "And you have every right to do exactly that. No one should ever make you feel like you don't belong somewhere just because of who you are." The simple sincerity of his words brought tears to Lisa's eyes, but they were tears of gratitude rather than hurt. For the first time since the confrontation began, she felt like herself again rather than feeling like a problem that needed to be solved. Tommy looked around at all the faces staring at him. The other customers, the cafe staff, even his fellow bikers were all looking at him with disappointment and disapproval. The confident anger he had felt earlier was slowly being replaced by an uncomfortable realization that he was completely alone in his thinking. Officer Johnson maintained his professional stance, waiting for Tommy to make his decision. "Sir, I've asked you to leave this establishment. Are you going to do that voluntarily, or do we need to make this more official?" The threat wasn't spoken harshly, but Tommy understood exactly what the officer meant. He could leave on his own, or he could be escorted away in a much more embarrassing manner. His pride was still fighting against backing down, but his common sense was finally starting to win. "Fine," Tommy said, his voice much quieter than it had been throughout the confrontation. "I'll leave. But this isn't over. People need to start having honest conversations about these things instead of just pretending everything is perfect. The only conversation that needs to happen here is the one where you learn to treat other people with basic respect." Officer Johnson replied calmly. "That's not pretending. That's just being a decent human being." Tommy started to walk away, but he stopped and turned back toward Lisa's table. For a moment, everyone tensed, worried that he might try to start the argument again. But instead, his expression was different. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with something else, maybe confusion or even a tiny bit of doubt. "Look, lady," he said to Lisa, his voice much softer than before. "I didn't mean to make you cry or anything. I don't understand why everything has to be so complicated these days." Lisa looked up at him, surprised by the change in his tone. She could see that he was struggling with something, and despite everything he had put her through, she felt a small amount of sympathy for him. "It's not complicated," she said gently. "I'm just a person trying to live her life, same as you." Tommy stared at her for a long moment, as if he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Then he nodded slightly and walked away without saying anything else. The other bikers followed him, but several of them stopped to apologize to Lisa and Mrs. Rodriguez before they left. Dave, the middle-aged biker who had spoken up earlier, approached Lisa's table. "Miss, I'm really sorry about what just happened. Tommy's new to our group, and we had no idea he felt that way about things. That's not who we are, and it's not what we stand for." Lisa managed a small smile. "Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. We ride to have fun and enjoy the freedom of the road," Dave continued. "We don't ride to make other people feel bad. Tommy's going to need to figure out whether he fits with our group or not." After the bikers left, Officer Johnson turned his attention back to Lisa. "Are you okay? I know that was a difficult situation to go through." Lisa took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm okay now. Thank you for stepping in when you did. I wasn't sure what was going to happen." "That's what I'm here for," Officer Johnson replied with a warm smile. "But I want you to know that you handled yourself really well. You stayed calm, you stood up for yourself, and you showed more grace than that man deserved." Mrs. Rodriguez brought over a fresh cup of coffee for Lisa, refusing to let her pay for it. "This one's on the house, sweetheart, and I want you to know that you will always be welcome here. Always." The other customers started coming over to Lisa's table to check on her and offer their support. The elderly couple introduced themselves properly and told her how much they admired her artwork. The young mother with the baby shared that her sister also used a wheelchair and had faced similar situations. "You're an inspiration," the young mother said. "The way you handled that whole thing with such dignity. I hope my daughter grows up to be as strong as you are." Lisa felt overwhelmed by all the kindness and support. What had started as one of the worst experiences of her life was turning into something completely different. She was discovering that her community was full of people who cared about doing what was right. Over the next few hours, word about what had happened at the cafe spread throughout the neighborhood. People who had missed the incident stopped by to check on Lisa and express their support. Some shared their own stories about times when they had witnessed unfair treatment or had experienced it themselves. An older woman named Betty, who owned a flower shop down the street, brought Lisa a small bouquet. "I heard what happened this morning," she said. "I want you to know that you belong here just as much as anyone else. More than some people, if you ask me." As the day went on, Lisa found herself having conversations with people she had only nodded to before. The incident had broken down barriers and created connections that might never have happened otherwise. She learned about Mr. Peterson's grandson, who was learning to walk with leg braces, and about Maria's brother who had struggled with depression after a car accident. Officer Johnson stopped by the cafe again during his afternoon patrol. He was pleased to see Lisa still at her table, working on her project and chatting with other customers as if nothing had happened. "How are you doing?" he asked, pulling up a chair beside her table. "I'm doing really well, actually," Lisa replied, and she seemed genuinely surprised by her own answer. "I was so upset this morning, but now I feel like I understand my community better than ever before. People have been so kind." "That's because people are generally good," Officer Johnson said. "Sometimes it takes a difficult situation to bring that goodness to the surface, but it's always there." Lisa saved her work and closed her laptop. "Officer Johnson, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you stand up for me the way you did? You could have just told him to move along and left it at that." Officer Johnson thought for a moment before answering. "When I became a police officer, I took an oath to protect and serve all members of the community. That means everyone, regardless of what they look like, how they walk, or what challenges they face. But beyond that, it was just the right thing to do." "It meant a lot to me," Lisa said quietly. "I've faced some difficult situations before, but I've never had someone explain so clearly why I have the right to be treated with respect." "You shouldn't have to fight for that right," Officer Johnson replied. "It should just be given to you, automatically. But unfortunately, not everyone understands that yet." Over the following weeks, something beautiful started happening in the neighborhood. Mrs. Rodriguez organized a community art show at the cafe, featuring Lisa's work alongside pieces from other local artists. The elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Chen, started a weekly coffee discussion group that met at Lisa's usual table, talking about books and current events. Dave and several of the other bikers began volunteering with a local organization that helped people with disabilities with transportation needs. They discovered that their motorcycles, while not accessible themselves, could be used to escort wheelchair-accessible vans on special outings and events. Even Tommy, though he had disappeared from the neighborhood for several weeks, eventually returned. He approached Mrs. Rodriguez one day when the cafe was quiet and asked if he could speak with her privately. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened that day," he told her. "I was wrong. I was angry about losing my job and about having to move here, and I took it out on someone who didn't deserve it." Mrs. Rodriguez listened carefully before responding. "It takes courage to admit when you've made a mistake. What matters now is what you do next." Tommy nodded. "I was wondering if you could help me figure out how to apologize to that young woman. I know I hurt her, and I want to make it right if I can." When Mrs. Rodriguez told Lisa about Tommy's request, Lisa was surprised but agreed to meet with him. The conversation was awkward at first, but Tommy's apology seemed genuine. "I grew up in a place where people with disabilities were hidden away," he explained. "I never learned that they were just regular people living regular lives. I'm not making excuses for how I acted. but I want you to know that I'm trying to learn and do better." Lisa appreciated his honesty. "I'm glad you're willing to learn. That's all any of us can do, really. Keep learning and trying to be better than we were yesterday." Over time, Tommy began volunteering at a local disability resource center, helping with building maintenance and learning about the challenges people with disabilities faced. He never became close friends with Lisa, but he would nod respectfully when he saw her at the cafe, and she would nod back. 6 months after the incident, Lisa was featured in the local newspaper for her growing graphic design business. The article mentioned how the support she had received from her community after a difficult experience had inspired her to create designs for several nonprofit organizations focused on inclusion and acceptance. Officer Johnson was also featured in the article, receiving recognition for his commitment to community policing and his role in turning a negative situation into a positive learning experience for everyone involved. The cafe became known as a place where everyone was welcome, where differences were celebrated rather than feared. Lisa's corner table was still her favorite spot, but now it was often surrounded by friends and neighbors who had become part of her extended community family. The incident that could have driven Lisa away from her favorite place had instead made it even more special. She had learned that standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, can create ripples of positive change that spread far beyond what anyone might expect. And on quiet Saturday mornings, when she sat at her table working on her latest design project, Lisa would sometimes catch Officer Johnson's eye during his patrol. They would exchange a small wave, a simple acknowledgement of the day that had changed everything for the better.